Christopher Sinclair spent 5 years trying to convince himself that he had moved on. He built an impeccable life, accepted choices that were not exactly his, but none of it prepared him for the Christmas when he returned to his childhood home. He wasn't expecting reunions. He didn't imagine the past was still breathing in that place. The woman he found in the kitchen that morning should not have been there. Not after 5 years. Not like that. She was the great love of his life. And now she was there, without warning. What Christopher didn't know was that she had accepted the job without imagining who the house belonged to, and without knowing that he now had someone else occupying a place in his life. 5 years of silence hide many things. Some of them grow. Could you work every day alongside the person who broke your heart? Would you have the courage to hide children from the man you once loved? And how would you react to discovering that you lost 5 years of your own children's lives without ever having a choice? Some truths don't appear by chance, they wait for the right moment. Take a deep breath, because this story is not just about love, it's about destiny, silence, and everything that couldn't be said. Welcome to Hearts Rewritten, dear family. If this is your first time here, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to be part of our little corner of stories our community loves to know. And if you enjoy stories that touch the heart, stay with us until the end. Sunday in Aspen carried a kind of silence that only existed when snow covered the world like a blanket. It wasn't an absence of life. It was as if everything simply breathed more softly. Grey light slipped through the living room curtains in gentle bands, illuminating golden dust in the air and the steam rising from a mug of hot chocolate on the table. Hannah was barefoot, wearing thick socks and a worn sweatshirt with the hood resting against her back. Her hair, tied into a rushed bun, revealed she had already spent the entire morning organizing the week inside her head. The house was small but cozy, simple furniture, a soft rug, and a bookshelf filled with children's books. Some crooked, others with bent corners, shaped by hands too small to be careful. In the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and butter wrapped the space. Hannah stirred a pot of oatmeal with apples, watching the twins on the living room floor out of the corner of her eye. Theo sat cross-legged, focused on building a toy car track. The pieces clicked together as if he had been born knowing exactly where each curve belonged. His face was serious, eyebrows slightly drawn together, eyes attentive. When Lily tried to place a piece the wrong way, he gently held it, like a patient adult disguised as a child. "Not like that, Lily," he said softly without raising his voice. "If you put it there, the car will fall." Lily, on the other hand, seemed made of questions and laughter. She wore a cotton dress with leggings underneath and socks dotted with little stars. Her hair, tied into 2 bouncing ponytails, moved every time she did, and she moved constantly, as if the world were too big to keep her still. "But I want it to fly," she insisted, spreading her arms like wings. Hannah smiled but felt a soft ache in her chest. Lily carried a light that filled the cracks of the house. Theo had that quiet way of observing everything, as if he were storing secrets he didn't yet know how to name. 2 different worlds. And sometimes Hannah caught herself thinking about the man they had never known, not with longing, but with a kind of painful respect for what fate had taken before it could ever bloom. She served the oatmeal into 2 small bowls, drizzled honey on top, and sliced strawberries into thin pieces. Then she called out, "You two, come eat before it gets cold." Lily came first, running, her socks sliding across the floor. "Mommy, is today pancake day?" "Today is oatmeal with honey." Hannah tapped her daughter's nose with her fingertip. "Pancakes are for when I have time to be a cartoon chef." Theo came last, unhurried, glancing down the hallway as if making sure nothing had changed since the last time he blinked. He sat at the table with straight posture, holding his spoon as if it was something important. "Are you going to work tomorrow?" he asked, direct and without preamble. Hannah rested her elbow on the table and looked at him with tenderness. "I am, my love. This week is going to be different." She took a deep breath, choosing words that would fit into small hearts. "Mommy is going to cook in a big house for a while, just for this Christmas season." Lily's eyes widened. "A princess house? A rich people's house?" Hannah corrected with a soft smile. "And I'm going to cook really good food." "Are we going with you?" Lily asked, already imagining snow-covered castles. "No, sweetheart." Hannah ran her hand through her hair. "You're staying here. You'll go to school, you'll play, and the aunt who takes care of you will stay with you after class." Theo chewed slowly. "You'll come back every day?" "I will." Hannah said it firmly, as if the word were a contract with the universe. "I'll be home before you go to sleep, I promise." Lily pouted. "I don't like it when you leave." I know, my love. Hannah felt her throat tighten but didn't let it show. But you know what I like, seeing you eat well with the house warm and having a beautiful Christmas. And for that, I need to work. Theo stayed quiet for 2 seconds, then asked in a small voice, do they have a dog there? Hannah laughed, surprised. I have no idea. Why? He shrugged, serious. If it's big, it might have a big dog. Lily clapped her hands. I want a dog. A dog costs more than hot chocolate, Lily. Hannah raised an eyebrow. And you don't even put your toys away yet. I do, Lily protested, pointing at the track. Theo puts them away. Theo didn't even blink. I put them away so pieces don't go missing. Hannah almost sighed, the way Theo spoke, as if life needed to make sense all the time. Sometimes it scared her, sometimes it comforted her. She kissed both of them on the tops of their heads, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and quiet morning, and let the moment settle inside her like a photograph before the week began changing everything. Later, when the afternoon had turned bluer and the sky threatened new snow, Hannah put on her long coat, secured her hair more firmly, and checked her work bag. Knives, her recipe notebook, thermal gloves, spices she liked to bring along because she trusted them the way one trusts old friends. Before leaving, she crouched in front of the twins, now absorbed in an illustrated book. Deal? She asked. Lily flashed a huge smile. Deal! You'll be back before the story. Theo only nodded but gripped her coat sleeve with a quick, almost invisible force. You'll really come back. I will. Hannah kissed his forehead. Always. The road to the Sinclair property felt like another city inside the same city. The snow there was cleaner, the trees more aligned, the entrances more discreet, as if even winter needed to behave politely in that place. When the gate opened, Hannah felt her stomach tighten, not from fear but from awareness of contrast. Her life was simple. This was another universe. The house appeared imposing. Dark wood, stone, large windows glowing with amber light from within. It smelled of old money and carefully guarded secrets. Hannah parked to the side, where a service entrance looked as elegant as the front of any normal house. Before she could knock, the door opened. A middle-aged woman with an impeccable uniform and a perfectly fitted grey apron greeted her with a restrained smile. You must be the cook, Hannah, right? Yes, Hannah replied. And you are Marlene. The woman extended her hand. I run the house. Cleaning, organization, staff schedules, everything that keeps this place working without looking like anyone actually works here. Hannah shook her hand, noticing the sharp, experienced gaze. Nice to meet you. Marlene led her down a heated corridor. The floors gleamed, and the paintings on the walls were old, snowy landscapes, as if that family collected winter itself. The Sinclairs are demanding, Marlene warned quietly, but they pay well, and they like order. I like order, Hannah replied honestly. Marlene let out a quick smile. Then you'll get along with me. The kitchen was enormous, professional, illuminated by elegant pendant lights. Light stone countertops, pans hanging as if they were decor rather than tools. Hannah took a deep breath. Here, at least, she felt at home. Mrs. Sinclair will be coming down, Marlene said, and Mr. Sinclair as well. They want to talk about the planning through Christmas and New Year's. Hannah nodded and arranged her items with precision, lining up her knives, opening her notebook, as if each gesture were a shield. Footsteps approached, light, deliberate. Margaret Sinclair entered first, impeccable, light-colored coat, hair pulled into a perfect bun, the posture of someone born knowing the world adjusts itself around her. Beside her was Richard Sinclair, tall, more reserved, serious gaze, hands clasped behind his back, as if he were assessing the kitchen and the woman at the same time. Hannah Brooks, Margaret said, extending her hand. Welcome. I hope you understand the importance of this season for our family. Hannah shook her hand firmly. I understand, Mrs. Sinclair. I'm here to do exactly what was agreed upon. Richard observed her for a second longer than necessary. Discretion is essential, he said, his voice low and direct. It always has been, Hannah replied without shrinking. Margaret seemed to like the answer. Excellent. Then let's talk about the calendar. She opened a slim, elegant folder. I want everything planned in advance. Dinners, visits, holiday meals. No improvisation. Hannah listened, took notes, kept her professional smile in place. But inside, as she looked at that house glowing with tradition and control, she felt a strange certainty. Margaret's folder remained open on the counter, like an object of authority. The pages were organized by dates, colors, and small markings that revealed someone accustomed to controlling time, her own and everyone else's. "We'll have guests for a few dinners," Margaret continued, sliding her finger down the page. "Nothing extravagant, people close to the family. I want elegant but traditional meals. Christmas here isn't about impressing, it's about maintaining standards." Richard Sinclair stood a few steps away, silent, observing Hannah as if assessing something beyond technique. He had the kind of presence that didn't need movement to be felt. Tall, rigid posture, hands always clasped behind his back. "And breakfast," he added. "I like exact times, 7 sharp." Hannah nodded, writing everything down in steady handwriting. "Perfect. I can prepare a weekly menu and adjust as needed." Margaret lifted her gaze, studying her more closely. "I like professionals who anticipate," she said. "You'll be responsible only for the kitchen. I don't want confusion of roles. Marlene coordinates the rest of the house." "Of course," Hannah replied. "The clearer, the better." Marlene, watching from the doorway, seemed to approve in silence. The meeting ended without prolonged handshakes, without unnecessary pleasantries. Margaret closed the folder and announced she needed to take a few calls. Richard left shortly after, leaving behind the sense that the house was never truly empty, only quiet. Alone in the kitchen, Hannah took her first deep breath since arriving. The space was large, overly organized, almost intimidating. But kitchens had always been a refuge for her. There, the world made sense. Ingredients followed logic, time had purpose, and the outcome depended on care. She put on her apron, washed her hands with hot water, and began. She sorted vegetables, organized pots, preheated the oven. Each movement was precise, almost ritualistic. As she chopped onions, she thought about the week ahead. Theo and Lily at school, the babysitter in the afternoons, that contract ensuring security for a few weeks. That was all, work. But the house seemed to be watching. There were old portraits on the hallway walls beside the kitchen, framed photographs of past Christmases, always the same living room, the same tree, people dressed too well to look relaxed. Hannah avoided looking closely. She didn't want to create intimacy where she didn't belong. By late morning, she prepared a light soup and fresh bread. Marlene appeared to take the trays. "They eat very little at lunch," she warned, "especially Mrs. Sinclair." "Understood. You cook well?" Marlene added with a half smile. "You can tell when someone respects food." Hannah smiled back, grateful for that small moment of humanity. When the clock struck 2 in the afternoon, Hannah cleaned everything with the same care she had begun with. She packed away her knives, noted adjustments in her notebook, and removed her apron. The arrangement was clear. Leave, pick up the children, return the next day. She was already walking toward the side door when she heard the sound. First, the heavy creak of the front door opening, then the rush of cold air flooding the hallway. Firm footsteps on the wooden floor, a different presence, denser. Marlene appeared, hurried. "Oh, he arrived early," she murmured, almost to herself. Hannah stopped. "Who arrived?" But the answer came before Marlene could speak. "Mom?" The voice carried easily through the house. Deep, far too familiar. Hannah's body reacted before her mind. The air seemed to thin, and for a second she thought she might fall. She gripped the edge of the counter, feeling the cold stone against her palm. No, it couldn't be. She turned slowly, as if the movement itself could change what was already inevitable. Christopher stepped into the hallway, removing his dark leather gloves, his heavy coat still fastened up to his neck. His hair slightly tousled by the wind, a 2-day shadow of beard on his face, eyes the same intense shade the past had never allowed her to forget. He stopped mid-step. Time didn't slow. It shattered. For a moment that lasted too long, neither of them spoke. Christopher blinked once, then again, as if trying to adjust reality. "Hannah?" The name came out low, incredulous. She felt her heart pound so hard it almost hurt. Christopher, nothing more. Sensing she had crossed into something that wasn't hers, Marlene retreated silently. Christopher took a step forward, then stopped, as if suddenly remembering where he was. "Hannah," the name came again, quiet, disbelieving. "Is it really you?" She felt the impact in her chest but didn't show it. She straightened her shoulders, the way she did when she needed to get through a difficult day without anyone noticing. Christopher. The silence between them was old, heavy, filled with things left unsaid. He watched her the way someone tries to recognize a landscape after years away, familiar, yet different enough to hurt. "What are you doing here?" he finally asked. "Working." The answer came simple, professional. "I was hired for the season." He frowned, confused. "Here, at my parents' house?" "Yes." Christopher ran a hand over his face, still processing. I had no idea. No one told me. I didn't know this house was yours either, Hannah replied with forced calm. Or your family's. I was only given the address. He nodded slowly, as if accepting something he had no control over. You look different, he said, without thinking. She held his gaze. People change, some more than others. He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Are you okay? The question nearly broke her. For a moment, she considered answering with the full truth, but she only took a deep breath. I am, very much so, she said firmly. And you? Trying to understand how the past decided to show up right now. Hannah picked up her bag, a clear sign of closure. Unfortunately, she whispered, I should go now. I'm done for today. He hesitated. Of course, Christopher paused, choosing his words. We'll talk later. She hesitated for 1 second. Just one. About work. We'll talk tomorrow, she replied carefully. Good afternoon, Christopher. He nodded, respecting the boundary. She passed by him without touching him, feeling the heat of his body so close it almost burned. When the door closed behind her, the air seemed to return to normal, but the world did not. Christopher remained standing in the hallway, heart racing, his entire past wide awake. Hannah got into the car, rested her forehead against the steering wheel for a second, and closed her eyes. That season was definitely not just work, and she knew that reunion had reopened doors that would not close easily. The road felt narrower that afternoon. Snow piled along the sides reflected the pale light of the fading day, and the steering wheel was far too cold beneath Hannah's hands. She drove slowly, but her mind raced far ahead of the car, slipping back 5 years without asking permission. Christopher Sinclair. The name echoed like something that should no longer have space. Hannah pressed her lips together, eyes fixed on the road, trying to keep the past in the back seat. It hadn't been a romantic reunion. It hadn't been gentle. It had been inevitable. She remembered the way he had frozen in the hallway, the genuine confusion in his eyes, his voice saying her name as if he still had the right to it. Hannah took a deep breath, letting the air out slowly as if she could push those images away. It's just work, she told herself. Just a few days. The school parking lot was full when she arrived. Parents talking in small groups, children running with backpacks far too big for their bodies. Hannah parked, turned off the car, and took a deep breath before getting out, as if preparing to cross an invisible line. Lily was the first to see her. "Mommy!" she shouted, waving both arms, her open smile lighting up her face. Theo came right behind her, more reserved, his backpack hanging from one shoulder, his attentive eyes scanning the space before settling on Hannah. He walked toward her with steps far too confident for someone so small. "You're late today, Mommy," he observed. Hannah crouched down to hug them, breathing in the familiar scent of children's soap and cold air. "A little," she admitted. "Work was different." Lily wrinkled her nose. "Different how?" "Like when the teacher suddenly changes the activity," Hannah replied with a smile. "It surprises you, but you manage." Theo didn't smile. He watched her for a second longer, as if storing that answer for later. In the car, Lily talked non-stop about a drawing she had made, a new song, a classmate who cried because he lost his glove. Hannah listened, responded, but part of her was still in that big house, in that silent hallway. Theo, in the back seat, stared out the window. "Did you like the job?" he asked suddenly. Hannah took a second to answer. "It's organized," she said. "Very different from here." "Were the people nice?" Lily asked. Hannah thought of Margaret, of Richards, and of Christopher. "Polite," she replied. "That counts." At home, routine took control again. Coats hung up, shoes lined neatly, backpacks dropped near the door. Hannah put water on to boil, made simple pasta with vegetables, something quick and warm. Lily helped stir the pot, talking loudly. Theo set the utensils carefully, aligning them as if it truly mattered. During dinner, Hannah laughed at the right moments, asked questions, listened to stories, but when she set the plates in the sink, she felt the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. Later, with both kids already in pajamas, Hannah read a short story. Lily fell asleep before the end, her breathing calm. Theo kept his eyes open until the last page. "You're going to work early again tomorrow?" he asked, his voice already low. "I am," Hannah replied, "but we'll have breakfast together first." He nodded, satisfied. When the house finally fell silent, Hannah sat on the couch with a cup of hot tea. Steam rose slowly. She leaned her head back against the cushion and closed her eyes for a moment. 5 years. 5 years since she had let him go without asking him to stay. 5 years since she had chosen to protect what was coming. Even without knowing exactly what it would be, she hadn't regretted it. Not until that hallway, that voice. The next morning, the alarm rang before sunrise. Hannah got up quietly, pulled on a thick sweater and went to the kitchen. She made simple pancakes, cut fruit, warmed milk. The smell woke Lily first. "Pancakes," she announced, appearing with messy hair. Theo came right after, already dressed, watching everything as if it were part of a plan. "Today the babysitter will pick you up after school," Hannah said as she served the plates. "Mummy might get home a little later." "That's fine," Lily replied, excited. "We can play more." Theo only nodded. "You'll be back before bedtime, Mummy?" he asked. Hannah paused for a second. "I will, love," she answered. "I promise." The goodbye at school was quick, but Hannah watched the two of them walk through the gate for a few seconds longer. Then she returned to the car, adjusted the mirror and drove to the Sinclair house with a tight feeling in her stomach. The house was quiet when she arrived. Marlene greeted her with a brief nod. Margaret was on a call in her office. Richard had left early. Hannah went straight to the kitchen, diving into work the way one dives into cold water to avoid thinking. She chopped, seasoned, organized. The sound of knives against the cutting board was steady, almost meditative. She was tasting a sauce when she felt it. Didn't hear it, felt it. The presence behind her. "Good morning." The voice made something inside her tighten. Hannah turned slowly. Christopher was there, without a coat, in a light shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked less composed than the day before, as if the night had not been kind. "Good morning," she replied, neutral. He began, then stopped. "I thought a lot last night." "I imagined you did," Hannah said, turning back to the stove. He stepped a little closer, respecting the invisible distance. "I don't want to make this awkward." She let out a brief, humorless laugh. "I think that ship has sailed," Christopher sighed. "You don't owe me explanations." He hesitated. "But I'd like to understand how you ended up here." Hannah turned off the heat, wiped her hands on a cloth, and finally looked at him. "I worked. I made choices. I lived," she replied. "Just like you." He nodded, taking it in. "I never thought I'd see you here," he confessed. "Neither did I," she answered honestly. Silence settled again, heavy, filled with things that didn't fit inside that kitchen. "Maybe," Christopher said at last, "it's best if we keep this professional." Hannah agreed with a slight nod. "It's best for everyone." He took a step back. "Then, welcome back, Hannah Brooks." She watched him leave, feeling her heart beat far too hard. Professional. The word echoed in Hannah's mind as she stood still in the kitchen, listening to Christopher's footsteps fade down the hallway. The sound of a door closing somewhere in the distance was soft, but enough to seal something neither of them had the courage to name. She let the air out slowly, as if she had been holding her breath since the moment he walked into the house. Her hands trembled slightly, and Hannah had to rest her fingers against the cold stone counter to steady herself. The kitchen was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. Now it carried memory. Professional. She repeated it once more, like someone trying to believe their own words. She finished straightening what was left, wiped down the counter with movements that were far too precise, and left through the side door without looking back. The cold outside hit her face like a reminder of reality. She needed to go back. She needed to pick up the children. She needed to be a mother before being anything else. In the car, Hannah waited a few seconds before starting the engine. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel, closed her eyes and let old images surface, not as full scenes, but as flashes. Christopher smiling in a small restaurant in Aspen, far from expensive lights, his hands covering hers across the table. Conversations that lasted too long for someone who claimed he never had time. They hadn't dated, they hadn't made promises, but they hadn't pretended it was nothing either. It had been weeks, few, intensely real. Christopher had always been too honest. He said he needed to leave, that his life already had tracks laid down, that he didn't know how to return to improvisation. Hannah had listened in silence, feeling the pain grow, but never begging. When he left, she didn't run after him. She chose to move forward. The school parking lot was loud when Hannah arrived. Children ran out, backpacks bouncing against their backs, sharp voices echoing through the cold air. The contrast with the silence of the Sinclair house was almost violent. "Mommy!" Lily shouted as soon as she saw her, running clumsily toward her. Hannah crouched down and opened her arms, feeling the light impact of the small body against her own. "Hi, my love." Theo came right after, walking quickly but not running. He stopped close, looking at his mother's face as if checking something important. "Are you okay, Mummy?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart, busy day." Hannah confirmed, running her hand through his hair. Work was big today. Lily grabbed the sleeve of her mother's coat. The teacher let us paint with real paint, she said excitedly. Mine was all blue. All blue? Hannah smiled. How bold. In the car, Lily talked non-stop about school, about the painting, about a boy who fell and cried. Theo watched the scenery through the window, swinging his feet in rhythm with the car. There's school again tomorrow? Lily asked. There is, Hannah replied. Then the babysitter will pick you up, okay? Can we have pasta today? Lily added without pause. Yes, Hannah laughed. Simple pasta. With cheese, Theo added, finally looking at her. At home, routine returned to its natural place. Coats tossed over a chair, shoes lined up by Theo without being asked. Lily sitting on the floor drawing while singing something she made up. Hannah cooked while listening to that familiar soundtrack, trying to anchor herself in the present. During dinner, Lily spilled a little sauce on the table and laughed. Oops, it's okay, Hannah said. The table won't cry. Theo wiped it with a napkin, focused. All done. After bath time, Hannah helped Lily into her star-patterned pajamas. Theo was already ready, sitting on the bed, hugging a pillow. Mommy, you work early tomorrow, right? Lily asked, yawning. I do, Hannah answered. But I'll wake you up. Promise? Lily insisted, holding out her pinky. Hannah hooked her finger with her daughter's. I promise. Theo simply nodded, satisfied with the answer. When both were asleep, Hannah turned off the light and stood there for a few seconds watching them, two small bodies steady breathing, her entire world concentrated right there. She closed the door carefully. That night, sleep took a long time to come. The word professional kept returning, mixed with Christopher's face, the way he had looked at her. Not like someone running into the past, but like someone realizing something important had been left unfinished. The next morning, Hannah woke before the alarm. She prepared breakfast in silence, trying to organize the day. Simple pancakes, fruit cut large enough not to cause trouble. Lily appeared, rubbing her eyes. Smells good, she murmured. Theo came right after, pulling out a chair. The babysitter's picking us up today, right? She is, Hannah confirmed. Mommy might take a little longer. Okay, he replied without drama. The goodbye at school was quick, but Hannah looked back twice before getting into the car. The Sinclair house welcomed her with the same controlled silence. Marlene greeted her with a nod. Margaret hadn't come downstairs yet. Richard wasn't there. Hannah began working, focused, determined not to think beyond what was right in front of her. The kitchen was far too quiet for a house that size, the kind of silence that didn't mean peace but vigilance. Hannah felt it on her skin as she slowly stirred a pot on the stove, steam rising and briefly fogging the window glass. She was there for a reason. She needed to repeat that like a mantra. The sound of footsteps in the hallway announced Christopher before he even appeared. Hannah didn't turn right away. She kept stirring the sauce, adjusting the salt, as if absolute focus were the only thing keeping her whole. It smells good, he said, leaning against the doorframe. It's just simple food, Hannah replied without looking at him. The way your mother asked. Christopher stepped into the kitchen slowly, watching her every move with too much attention to be casual. You always cooked like this, he commented, like you were solving a problem. She turned off the stove and finally faced him. Cooking is solving problems. He gave a faint smile, but it didn't last long. My mother likes to say that order prevents conflict. Sometimes it just hides it, Hannah replied, before she could stop herself. The silence that followed was dense. Christopher tilted his head, studying her. You're still direct, and you still think everything can be organized, she shot back. No aggression, just truth. Before he could respond, firm footsteps approached. Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway, her quick gaze moving from Hannah to her son, and lingering a second longer than necessary between the two. I see you're already comfortable, she said, in a tone far too polite. Hannah lowered her eyes immediately. Lunch will be ready in 20 minutes, Mrs. Sinclair. Excellent, Margaret replied. Christopher, I need to speak with you later. The later carried a silent warning. During lunch, conversation was restrained. Richard spoke about upcoming commitments, Margaret about the holiday schedule. Christopher responded in short phrases. Hannah served, cleared plates, moved in and out as if invisible, but she felt the looks. Margaret watched everything. She noticed when Christopher spoke directly to Hannah, when his tone softened around her, when Hannah answered with excessive care, nothing explicit, but enough to stir suspicion. After lunch, Hannah returned to the kitchen to clean everything. She needed to keep her mind busy. Thinking too much was dangerous in that house, As she scrubbed the counter, she reminded herself why she was there. Theo and Lily. Stability. The Christmas she had promised them. Nothing else mattered. "You don't need to clean that right now," Christopher said, appearing again. "I need to keep everything ready for dinner," Hannah replied. "You work like you're running away," he observed, without accusation. She paused for a moment. "I'm not running away. I'm doing what I came here to do." "And what did you come here to do, Hannah?" he asked more quietly. She took a deep breath and met his gaze. "To work, that's all." Christopher nodded slowly. "All right." But something in his eyes said that answer wasn't enough. Upstairs, Margaret closed her office door carefully and picked up the phone. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "Emma," she said when the call was answered. "Dear, yes, everything's fine. I was wondering if you'd like to spend a few days with us in Aspen. Christopher is here, and I think it would be good for everyone." She listened, satisfied. "Wonderful. Come whenever you can." After hanging up, Margaret looked out the window toward the snow-covered courtyard. "Some things need to be put back in their proper place," she murmured to herself. Late in the afternoon, Hannah was putting away her utensils when she heard the sound of a car arriving. Different, lighter, doors closing quickly. A woman's laughter cut through the cold air. Her stomach tightened before she even knew why. Marlene appeared in the kitchen, adjusting her apron. "Miss Monroe has arrived," she announced. Mrs. Sinclair asked for the guest room to be prepared. Hannah froze for an imperceptible second. "Miss Monroe," she repeated, neutral. "Mr. Christopher's girlfriend," Marlene replied, as if it were basic information. The word echoed in Hannah's mind like a delayed warning. Girlfriend. The atmosphere had changed. Hannah felt it in her body before hearing anything else. It was as if the air had grown heavier, denser, demanding attention. She zipped her bag all the way closed and set it on the counter, forcing her hands to remain visible, controlled. From the hallway, footsteps approached. "Christopher?" The female voice was firm, self-assured, spoken with an intimate ease, the kind of intimacy that doesn't ask permission because it believes it has the right. Hannah stayed with her back turned, adjusting the folded cloth beside the sink as if that detail were essential. Christopher answered almost immediately. "I'm here." Hannah caught the tone. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It was careful, an uncomfortable middle ground. They appeared in the kitchen doorway seconds later. Emma Monroe was even more impeccable up close. A light-colored coat perfectly tailored to her body, boots spotless despite the snow outside, hair worn loose in carefully arranged waves. She stepped in like someone who already knew the space, the boundaries, and the role expected of her. "You must be the new cook," Emma said, smiling first at Hannah, then turning her gaze back to Christopher. "Your mother mentioned she'd finally found someone reliable." The word was spoken with excessive softness. Hannah turned slowly, assuming the professional posture she had long learned to wear like armor. "Hannah Brooks," she introduced herself. "Good evening." Emma studied her without haste, from her shoes to her face. There was no open hostility, only calculation. "Emma Monroe," she replied, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you." The handshake was brief, firm, without warmth. Hannah noticed the discreet ring on Emma's finger. It wasn't an engagement ring, not yet, but it sat there like a promise. "Dinner will be served in an hour," Hannah informed her, releasing her hand first. "Mrs. Sinclair requested something more elaborate tonight." Emma smiled. Of course she did. Margaret appeared just behind them, clearly satisfied with the scene in front of her. The trio was complete, each person in their place. "Emma arrived as a surprise, dear," Margaret announced, as if it were spontaneous. "I thought it would be nice to have her company with us." Christopher didn't respond right away. He simply nodded. Hannah turned back to the stove. She needed movement. She needed to remember why she was there. As she arranged the dishes, she felt Emma's gaze land on her more than once. Not curious, evaluating, like someone measuring an unexpected variable. "How long have you been working for the family?" Emma asked, casually leaning against the central island. "I started this week," Hannah replied without turning. "So not very long. Long enough to fulfill the contract." Emma tilted her head, satisfied with the evasive answer. "Christopher has always been very particular about what happens in this house," she commented, now looking at him. "I imagine you approve," he answered with a restrained half-smile. "I trust my mother's judgment." Margaret watched in silence. This was exactly what she wanted. Visible boundaries, clear roles, territory marked. Dinner was served with precision. Polite conversation, surface-level comments. No questions that pierced beyond appearances. Hannah moved in and out of the dining room like a trained shadow, yet felt every micro-tension in the air. Emma touched Christopher's arm when she spoke. Margaret watched Hannah at the slightest movement. Richard remained quiet, far too attentive. At one point, as Hannah cleared a plate, she heard Emma remark, "Aspen always brings back interesting memories, don't you think, Christopher?" He lifted his gaze slowly. "Some," he replied. Hannah felt the weight of that word like a silent warning. When dinner ended, she cleared everything quickly. She needed to leave. She needed to breathe outside that house before something slipped. Already in the side hallway, Christopher caught up to her. "Hannah," he called softly. She stopped but didn't turn right away. "Yes? I didn't know Emma would be here today." Hannah took a deep breath before facing him. "It doesn't change anything for me." Christopher nodded, defeated. "You're right." She left before he could say anything else. In the living room, Emma watched the door through which Hannah had disappeared. The smile was still there, but now it was thinner. "Interesting," she murmured. Margaret stepped closer, speaking quietly. "Some people forget their place very easily," Emma replied, steady. "Don't worry, I don't forget mine." Outside, the cold hit Hannah like a necessary shock. She got into the car, closed the door, and sat there for a few seconds, hands on the steering wheel. The game had changed. And now, there was no longer any way to pretend it was just work. The snow hadn't stopped overnight. By morning, Aspen seemed wrapped in a deceptive calm, too white to be innocent. Hannah felt it the moment she parked the car along the side of the Sinclair property. The place remained imposing, silent, almost solemn, as if nothing there could ever slip out of control. But it had, and she felt it in her entire body. As she crossed the side entrance, the sound of her own footsteps echoed through the heated corridor. The scent of the house, old wood, fireplace smoke, impeccable cleanliness, was no longer unfamiliar. Still, something had changed since the night before. There was tension in the air, not the quiet kind from before, but something more active, alert. "Good morning, Hannah." Emma's voice came from the living room before Hannah even reached the kitchen. She paused for half a second, squared her shoulders, then continued. Emma sat in one of the light-colored armchairs, legs crossed, a tablet resting on her lap. She wore an outfit far too elegant for an ordinary morning, as if she were always ready to be seen. Margaret sat beside her, reviewing printed documents. "Good morning," Hannah replied, professional. Emma smiled, that perfect smile that never reached her eyes. "Sleep well? I imagine working here requires adjustment." "Like any new job," Hannah answered, neutral. "Of course," Emma agreed, closing the tablet, "especially when it involves a family like this one." Margaret lifted her gaze briefly, observing the two of them. "Christopher will be down in a few minutes," she said. "He has meetings today, but he'll have breakfast with us." Meetings. There were always meetings in his life. Hannah headed to the kitchen, focusing on the preparations. Fresh coffee, fruit, warm bread, precise movements, almost therapeutic. She needed that focus to keep from thinking too much. As she arranged the tray, she heard firm footsteps approaching. Christopher entered, already dressed like the man who ran empires. Dark suit, discreet watch on his wrist, focused expression. He didn't just look like a rich man. He looked like someone used to deciding the fate of thousands before 9 in the morning. "Good morning," he said, his eyes sweeping quickly over the kitchen and stopping on Hannah for a second longer than they should have. "Good morning," she replied. Emma rose immediately, stepping closer to him. "You woke up early," she said, touching his arm with practiced ease. "The Sinclair Holdings Board doesn't wait," Christopher replied. "We have a major expansion underway." Hannah felt the weight of those words even without being part of the conversation. Sinclair Holdings wasn't just a company, it was the family legacy, a conglomerate dominating entire sectors: technology, luxury real estate, international investments. Christopher wasn't just the son, he was the CEO, the man now carrying on his shoulders the empire built by his father, a millionaire by inheritance and by competence. He spent the entire night on calls, Emma said proudly, looking at Margaret. "It's impressive how he manages to keep everything under control." Margaret smiled, satisfied. Christopher has always been prepared for this. At the table, conversation revolved around business, mergers, numbers that didn't belong to Hannah's reality. She served coffee, cleared cups, moved in and out, but felt the contrast sharply. Two worlds, one shared space. "Hannah," Emma called, interrupting her thoughts. "Could you prepare something special for dinner tomorrow?" "Of course," Hannah replied. "Something worthy of the house," Emma added, her assessing gaze sweeping over her. "We'll have important guests, investors." Hannah held her gaze. I'm used to working for demanding people. Christopher lifted his head quickly, catching the tone. Hannah is extremely competent, he said. My mother chose her for that reason. Emma smiled again, but there was something sharper there now. I don't doubt it, she replied. I just like to make sure everything is aligned. After breakfast, Christopher headed to the improvised office upstairs. Margaret left to take a call. Emma remained in the living room, as if she had all the time in the world. Hannah was clearing the last items when she felt Emma's gaze on her again. Have you lived in Aspen long? Emma asked, far too casually. A few years, Hannah replied, keeping her focus on the tray. It must be interesting living here without all the apparatus, Emma commented. Aspen can be a lonely place for those who don't belong to certain circles. Hannah took a deep breath. I like my life, she replied firmly. Emma tilted her head. I imagine simplicity has its charm. Silence. Hannah returned to the kitchen, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave her. That woman wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was mapping territory. Hours later, as Hannah prepared lunch, Christopher appeared again, this time without his jacket, sleeves rolled up, phone still in hand. Can I talk to you for a minute? He asked quietly. Hannah hesitated, then nodded. They stood near the counter, the kitchen a silent witness. Emma can be intense, he said, choosing his words. I noticed, Hannah replied. She doesn't know anything about us, he continued. About what happened. Something tightened inside Hannah. There was no us, Christopher. There was a moment, and it stayed in the past. He studied her carefully. You say that as if it were easy. It wasn't, she answered, finally letting a bit of the truth slip. But it was necessary. The silence between them was different now, heavier, more dangerous. Sometimes, Christopher said, I wonder if I was a coward. Hannah met his gaze. You made choices. So did I. Before he could say anything else, footsteps echoed again. Emma stood in the kitchen doorway. Sorry to interrupt, she said with an impeccable smile. Christopher, the lawyer, called. He said he needs to talk about the acquisition in Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek, his other world. The city where he lived now, surrounded by luxury, far from anything that didn't fit into the schedule of a millionaire CEO. Christopher nodded. I'll be right there. Before leaving, he looked at Hannah. We'll talk later. It wasn't a request, it was a certainty. When they were alone again, Emma stepped closer. You seem like someone who observes a lot, she said quietly. People like that tend to know too much. Hannah held her ground, not stepping back. I observe because it's part of my job. I hope you remember what your job is, Emma replied, smiling. When Emma left, Hannah felt the weight settle on her shoulders. Hiding the truth was becoming harder. Every look, every silence, every subtle game. She had entered that house for work, but now the past was knocking far too hard to be ignored. And Emma Monroe had just made one thing clear. She had no intention of stepping aside. Hannah drove home with her fingers tight around the steering wheel, as if pressure alone could keep the world in place. Aspen glittered outside with a cold that was almost too beautiful. Gold-lit shop windows, trees wrapped in lights, snow piled on rooftops, and yet she felt there was danger beneath it all, like thin ice over a lake. The Sinclair mansion was behind her, but the feeling of Emma watching her every move came along, clinging to her thoughts. That woman didn't smile to be kind. She smiled to mark territory. When she parked near her building, night had already fallen. The sky was dark and the air smelled of fireplace smoke and damp pine. Hannah climbed the stairs quickly, bag over her shoulder, body tired and mind racing, wanting to arrive before Theo and Lily became nothing but drowsiness. The door opened, and a wave of domestic warmth wrapped around her, the scent of children's soap, reheated pasta, and that light lavender fragrance the babysitter always left behind. Mommy! Lily came running down the hallway, wearing star-patterned pajamas, her hair still damp from her bath. Theo followed more slowly, hugging a stuffed bear whose ear had gone crooked from too much love. You came back, Lily announced as if it were a victory. Hannah crouched and pulled them into a tight hug, feeling the small weight of their bodies, her heart finally finding ground. I'm back, my loves. I promised. Theo rested his forehead against her shoulder, silent. Lily held her mother's face with both hands, insistent. You look like you're thinking. Hannah let out a short laugh. I look like I work too much, that's all. Theo looked up. Was it the big job today? It was, she replied, choosing her words carefully. It's a important house. Lily opened her arms wide. Like a princess house? Like a house where people like everything to stay in its place, Hannah said, trying to smile. Even the air feels like it has rules. Theo frowned, confused. Air doesn't have rules. In that house it seems like it does, Hannah replied, which earned a small giggle from Lily. The babysitter appeared in the living room picking up her bag. They ate really well. Theo asked you to read the train book, but I told him you'd choose. Thank you, Hannah said gratefully, and waited for the door to close so the world could become small again. At bedtime, Lily jumped onto the bed before Hannah finished pulling up the blanket. Tonight you read 2 extra pages, she declared, and you close your eyes earlier. Hannah shot back, adjusting the pillow. Theo climbed up with the bear, sat against the headboard and waited, attentive as if the story were a contract. Hannah picked up the book, sat between them, and the bedside lamp turned the room soft, golden, safe. As she read, she watched their faces. Lily slowly relaxing, mouth slightly open, fingers still gripping the hem of her pajamas. Theo following every line with eyes far too serious, as if trying to understand everything that existed beneath the words. When she finished, Lily was almost asleep. "Mommy?" she murmured, her voice cotton soft. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Hannah swallowed hard. She thought of Emma, of Margaret, of Christopher. "I am," she said anyway. "I always come back." Theo didn't ask anything. He simply reached out with his small hand and held one of her fingers for a second, strong for someone so little. Then he let go as if saying, "Okay, I trust you," and turned onto his side. Alone in the living room, Hannah spent a few minutes staring at her own shadow on the wall. The word professional was still there, but now it felt fragile, because the problem wasn't Christopher looking too much. The problem was her feeling too much. The next morning, Hannah arrived at the Sinclair house early, before the sun had even decided to appear. The gate opened with that silent efficiency of something programmed to obey. The path to the side door was clean, unmarked, as if the snow were afraid to leave traces there. Marlene led her without conversation to a small office beside the main corridor. Margaret Sinclair was already waiting. The lady of the house was impeccable as always, light coat, hair pulled back, discreet perfume, and her gaze carried the precision of someone used to separating what serves from what interferes. "Hannah," Margaret began, without sitting down. "I'll be clear because I appreciate clarity. My son cannot be distracted right now." Hannah kept her posture firm, hands still at her sides. "I understand, Mrs. Sinclair. Some women confuse proximity with opportunity," Margaret continued, her voice controlled, far too polite for the weight of the words. "And I'm not implying anything. I'm preventing it." Hannah's face remained still, but inside something burned. "I was hired to cook, and that's what I will do." Margaret tilted her head. "Excellent. Then we're aligned." Hannah left that conversation feeling the message exactly as it was meant. You are not welcome. Not as a memory, not as a presence, not as someone Christopher might look at twice. She returned to the kitchen with a hardened heart and cold hands. She prepared breakfast as if building a wall. Eggs, fruit, bread, strong coffee. Everything perfect, everything in place. When Christopher appeared, already with his phone in hand and the expression of a man carrying an entire world, Hannah felt the silent shock again. He was the millionaire CEO of Sinclair Holdings, an empire that never stopped, not even when he returned to Aspen. He owned decisions that moved enormous businesses, properties, technology, investments, and yet, in that hallway, he looked like nothing more than a man trying to balance a past that didn't fit into a schedule. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Good morning," Hannah replied, measuring every syllable. He stepped a little closer, as if trying to speak without being overheard. "My mother talked to you." Hannah lifted her eyes. "She did." Christopher clenched his jaw, irritated. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she replied quickly. "Just do what you have to do. I will too." He looked at her, as if he wanted to argue, but at that moment, footsteps appeared in the corridor. Emma. She showed up in the doorway as if she belonged in that kitchen too. Elegant coat, ready smile, a gaze that swept the room and chose where to sink the blade without drawing blood. "Good morning, Hannah," she said, far too sweetly. "I hope the coffee is as perfect as yesterday." "It is," Hannah replied, professional. Emma stepped closer to Christopher, touching his arm. "I was looking at Aspen's event calendar. Maybe we should attend the charity dinner this weekend. Your name as CEO draws a lot of attention, and your family will like it." Christopher didn't answer right away. His silence seemed to irritate Emma, but she smiled anyway, as if she had won. Later, after lunch, Hannah was about to start preparing dinner when something happened that no one had anticipated. A sudden snowstorm began outside with stronger winds, and Marlene appeared, saying the power was fluctuating. The lights flickered as if the house were breathing in short gasps. Margaret asked someone to check the generator. Emma, with a dramatic gesture, complained about the cold as if she had never lived through a real winter. Hannah went to the larger pantry, a huge space, almost a room, with tall shelves and a heavy door, to grab extra ingredients for dinner. Christopher appeared behind her, following without being called, as if the house itself had decided to push them into the same place. "You shouldn't go out in the dark. I mean, without any light in a house this big," he said, serious, almost protective. "I'm going to the pantry, Christopher. Not into a forest," Hannah replied, trying to ease the moment. He gave a half smile, and for a second the tension turned into memory. That was when the lights went out completely. The generator lagged. The entire house went dark for an instant. Hannah instinctively stepped back, and the heavy pantry door slammed shut with a dry clack. "Silence?" Hannah tried the handle. "Nothing." "No," she murmured, her chest tightening. Christopher tried as well. "It's stuck." Outside, distant, muffled voices. No one would hear easily in that wide corridor, in that massive house. Hannah's breathing sped up. "Marlene!" she called. "In here!" No answer. Christopher leaned his shoulder into the door and knocked with controlled force. "We're in the pantry!" he shouted. The sound seemed swallowed by the house. Hannah looked around. Shelves, boxes, the smell of flour, spices, wood. Only a faint emergency light that took a moment to turn on, washing everything in a pale glow. Her heart raced. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can't be stuck in here." Christopher turned to her. "We're getting out, calm down." I can't be stuck here, I need to leave." Hannah let slip, her voice breaking before she could stop it. She stopped. Too late. Christopher froze. "How you have what?" Hannah closed her eyes for a second, as if she could rewind time and swallow the words. I have things to take care of," she tried. Christopher stepped closer, his gaze changing. "Hannah, look at me." She did, and the world inside the pantry suddenly felt far too small. "You said I have," he pressed. "What do you have?" Hannah felt her chest tighten, the image of Theo and Lily hitting her like a blow. Margaret's voice saying, "My son can't be distracted." Emma's smile. 5 years of silence. "I have children," she finally said, almost in a whisper. "I have children who need me at night, Christopher." The shock on his face was so real it hurt to watch. "Children?" The word came out as if it made no sense. "What do you mean? How many?" Hannah swallowed hard. "2. A boy and a girl." He went pale. "2. And..." He ran a hand over his face, stunned. "How old are they?" "They're 5 years old, Christopher." "You're telling me that?" His voice shook. "This is serious, Hannah. You're saying they're my..." Hannah didn't answer right away, and that was answer enough. Christopher let out a low sound, almost a humorless laugh, but it was pure panic. No, this..." He breathed hard. 5 years. "I know," Hannah said quickly, tears burning but not falling. "I know exactly when it was." Christopher leaned against the shelf as if he needed support. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Hannah clenched her fists. "Because you walked out of my life. Because you made it clear there was no room for improvisation, for complications. Because you had an entire world on your shoulders. Your father, your business, Sinclair Holdings, Beaver Creek, and I was just a small piece of aspen you could forget." "I didn't forget," he whispered, and it came out as pure truth. "But you moved on," Hannah said, vulnerable now. "And so did I. I didn't ask for anything because I knew who you were back then. A man trained to do what his family expects. You would love me and still leave." Christopher closed his eyes, breathing as if trying not to break right there. Outside, footsteps finally approached. Marlene's voice echoed, "Mr. Christopher! Hannah, where are you?" Christopher banged on the door. "Here, the door's stuck." The latch shifted. The door creaked open, and the hallway light flooded the pantry like a shock. Hannah wiped her face too quickly. Christopher stepped out first, rigid, as if carrying an explosion inside him. In the corridor, Emma appeared a few feet away, her gaze sharp. "What happened?" she asked with a light laugh. "Did you get stuck?" Christopher didn't answer. Hannah kept her face neutral, but inside her world was spinning. Emma studied them for a second longer than necessary, and when Hannah passed by, Emma asked with sharpened sweetness, "Hannah, where do you live again? Do you have family here in Aspen? Are you married?" Hannah paused just long enough not to seem suspicious. "I'm not married," she replied, "and I live nearby." Emma smiled. Interesting, because I know practically everyone who circulates around the Sinclairs, and you weren't on the map. Her gaze gleamed, predatory. Tell me something, Emma continued, her voice low like someone offering poisoned sugar. Have you ever had anything with my boyfriend? Hannah felt the ground shift, her heart pound harder, but her face remained still. She knew any hesitation would be used against her. No, she answered firmly. I haven't. Emma held her gaze for a few seconds. The smile didn't disappear, it simply adjusted, like someone tucking away an important card for the right moment. I see, she said at last. Sometimes people don't define anything the same way. She walked away with calm steps, as if the subject were closed. But Hannah felt the warning. This was only beginning. That same night, Emma didn't return for dinner. She said she had commitments in Aspen. She left too early. Too serene. In the guest room, she opened her laptop and typed the name she had seen on the kitchen contract, Hannah Brooks. It didn't take long. A simple address, a nearby public school, no connections to companies, boards, or relevant social circles. But then Emma found something that made her stomach turn. 2 school records linked to the same address. Theo Brooks, Lily Brooks, 5 years old. Emma leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the screen. Of course, she murmured. The next morning, Emma showed nothing. She observed. She watched Christopher come down the stairs earlier than usual, already dressed like the millionaire CEO of Sinclair Holdings, heir and leader of an empire that controlled technology, luxury real estate, and global investments. She watched how distracted he seemed, far too rare for someone trained to decide destinies before breakfast. Mid-morning, Emma found Margaret in the reading room. Margaret, she called softly, may I ask you something? Of course, dear. Did you know Hannah has children? Margaret lifted her gaze slowly. Children. 2, Emma continued, as if sharing a casual curiosity. 5 years old. They live here in Aspen. Silence fell, heavy. That wasn't in the contract, Margaret said coldly. No, Emma agreed, and I found it concerning. A woman so close to Christopher, with an entire life no one knows. Margaret closed the folder with restrained force. Where did you get this information? Basic verification, Emma replied. Anyone can do it these days. Margaret stood up. Richard needs to know. Hours later, Hannah was called into the office. Margaret sat behind the desk. Richard stood by the window. Emma leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Hannah, Margaret began without preamble. Do you have children? I do, Hannah answered without hesitation. Why was this never mentioned? Because it doesn't interfere with my work. It interferes when it involves my son, Richard said directly. Emma stepped forward. Christopher didn't know, she said. And now we're wondering what else he doesn't know. Hannah took a deep breath. He knows. The impact was immediate. What do you mean he knows? Margaret demanded. The door opened before Hannah could answer. Christopher walked in. I know, he said firmly. And you're going to stop this right now. Margaret stood, shocked. Is this true? It is, he replied. I have 2 children. The silence was absolute. That's impossible, Richard said. You can't accept something like this without proof. Margaret inhaled deeply, her face rigid. Christopher, you are the CEO of a billion-dollar conglomerate. There have been people trying to get close to our family before. If this is true, then it needs to be confirmed. You're talking about what? He asked, though he already knew. A DNA test, Margaret said plainly. To confirm whether those children are really yours. Hannah stepped forward. I have no problem with that, she said clearly. I never have, because I know who the father of my children is. Emma watched in silence, far too satisfied. Christopher closed his eyes for a second, then looked at Hannah. I believe you, he said, but they need this. I know, Hannah replied. People like them always need proof. Christopher turned to his parents. Where this ends is with me, not with you. Then you'll act like a responsible man, Richard replied, starting by meeting those children. Christopher turned to Hannah. Where are they? At home. Then take me to them. The drive to the apartment was silent. When the door opened, Lily ran out first. Mummy! Theo stood up more slowly, attentive, watching the tall man behind her. Christopher stopped at the threshold. The shock was immediate. The eyes, the features, the serious way of observing before speaking. Hi, Lily said curiously. Are you Mummy's friend? Christopher knelt slowly. I am, he replied, his voice breaking. May I stay for a little while? Theo didn't answer. He simply stared at him. Hannah watched, her heart completely exposed. In that moment, the world of the millionaire, the CEO, the Sinclair empire, shrank. Hi, Lily said curiously. Are you Mommy's friend? Christopher knelt slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter a moment far too fragile to be rushed. I am, he answered, his voice low, slightly rough. A work friend. The big job? Lily pressed, tilting her head. The big job, he confirmed, trying to smile. Theo said nothing. He simply stared at him. His arms were crossed against his chest, his body leaning slightly back in a defensive posture that didn't match a 5-year-old, but matched Christopher all too well. Hannah watched everything from near the door, her heart exposed like an open wound. That scene was everything she had feared, and everything she had silently wished for. They've already had lunch, she said, breaking the silence. I need to take them now. Christopher stood up slowly, respecting the invisible boundary Theo had set. Of course, he said. I'll drive you. Theo frowned. You drive? I do, Christopher replied. Well? Theo insisted. Christopher smiled faintly, surprised. Very well. Okay, Theo concluded. Then it's fine. Lily was already excited. Is his car big? She asked her mother. Hannah took a deep breath. It is, she replied, but you'll sit properly. The drive to the Sinclair house was quiet at first. The sky was darkening early, a typical winter afternoon in Aspen. Christopher drove with exaggerated care, as if every turn were an invisible test. Do you live close to Mommy? Lily asked, looking out the window. Not very, he replied. I live in Beaver Creek. Is it far? Theo asked, still serious. A little, Christopher said, but you can go and come back. Hannah felt the weight of the words fall like an unspoken promise. When they arrived at the Sinclair mansion, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The gate opened silently. The garden lights were on, reflecting on the snow as if everything there existed to impress. Wow, Lily murmured. It looks like a castle. Theo said nothing, but squeezed Hannah's hand tighter. Margaret was in the living room when they entered. The smile she tried to form died before reaching her eyes. So, she began, observing the children. These are them. They are, Christopher replied firmly. Richard remained standing, arms crossed, assessing the situation as if facing a report he didn't want to accept. Emma appeared moments later, impeccable as always. What a surprise, she said, with a smile that fooled no one. Lily smiled back politely. Hi. Hello, sweetheart, Emma replied. What a beautiful doll. Theo took a step back. It's Lily's, he said defensively. Hannah immediately positioned herself between her children and the room. They won't stay long. Margaret took a deep breath. We need to handle this in a rational way. Christopher turned to his parents. You already did. You asked for the test. It will be done. Today, Richard added. The sooner, the better. Hannah nodded. I have nothing to hide. The lab was discreet, quick, silent. The children found it strange but not frightening. Lily asked if it was a vaccine. Theo asked if it would hurt. Christopher stayed by their side the entire time. It won't hurt, he said, with a firmness that seemed to protect himself more than them. When it was over, the car returned to the Sinclair house in absolute silence. Are we staying here? Lily asked. Hannah crouched down. Just for a little while. Okay, Lily replied, trusting. But then we're going home. We are, Hannah confirmed. The following hours were strange. Too long. Emma watched Hannah's every move with eyes that lingered too much. She corrected irrelevant details. The napkin goes on the left, she said curtly. It's always been on the right, Hannah replied calmly. Not anymore. Christopher heard it. Leave it as it was. Emma turned to him. I'm just helping. No, he replied. You're controlling. The silence that followed was deeply uncomfortable. 2 days later, the results arrived. Margaret opened the envelope with trembling hands. Read it. Read it again. The color drained completely from her face. Genetic compatibility. 99.9%. Richard ran a hand over his face. So it's true. Emma stood motionless, jaw tight, eyes dark. That doesn't change everything, she said coldly. It changes biology, not choices. Christopher took a deep breath. For the first time since it all began, he looked relieved. It changes everything for me. Hannah watched in silence. There was no victory there, only confirmation. We need to talk, Margaret said stiffly. All of us. But Christopher didn't wait. No, he said. Now you're going to listen. He stood up, the millionaire, heir to an empire, finally using that presence not for business, but to protect. 5 years ago, I left because you decided what was best for me. Today, I decide. These are my children. And Hannah is not here to take advantage of anything. Emma laughed without humor. You're going to throw away everything you built because of Careful, he cut her off, with what you say. Emma glared at him, furious. She's an employee of this house. No, Christopher replied. She's the mother of my children. Silence. That night, Hannah went home with the children. Christopher stood at the door, watching the car disappear. Theo turned around in the back seat. Mommy, he's important, right? Hannah smiled, exhausted. He is. Back at the mansion, Emma entered her room and slammed the door. This isn't over, she muttered. I don't lose. But for the first time, there was something she could not control. The Sinclair house felt heavy the next morning. There were no raised voices, no open arguments, just a different kind of silence, uncomfortable, alert, as if something had finally been knocked out of place, and no one knew how to put it back. Margaret hadn't slept well. Sitting at the dining room table, an untouched cup of coffee in front of her, she flipped through old documents Emma had left on the sideboard the night before. Resumes, social references, invitations to charity events, everything too impeccable. Have you noticed, Margaret said without looking up, that none of these people truly know Emma? Richard stopped behind her. What do you mean? Their contacts, appearances, vague recommendations, she sighed. No real friendships, no long history, just access. Richard crossed his arms. She always knew how to position herself. Yes, Margaret agreed coolly. And now I'm beginning to understand why. A short while later, Christopher entered the room. He was dressed simply, without the Millionaire CEO uniform he usually wore like armor. He looked younger, more tired, more real. We need to talk, Margaret said. I know, he replied. She closed the folder. Emma came to us last night. Christopher lifted his gaze. For what? To clarify things, Margaret said, making air quotes. She said Hannah is taking advantage of the situation, that she always knew, that she planned everything. Richard exhaled deeply. And that's when we started asking questions, he added. Christopher remained silent. Christopher, Margaret hesitated. Did you know Emma tried to contact an old business partner of mine, offering information about you, about the company? The impact hit him like a punch. What? She calls it protecting the future, Richard said sharply. I call it manipulation. Silence spread through the room. You're realizing now, Christopher said at last, what it took me years to see. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment. Perhaps, she admitted, we were the ones who brought the wrong person into this house. Christopher didn't answer. He already had his phone in his hand. The message reached Hannah shortly after 7 that morning. Good morning. May I come by today? I'd like to see the children and take you to work if you'd like and allow it. Hannah read it twice, her heart beat differently. She glanced at the clock. Still early. Theo and Lily were asleep. The house was quiet, wrapped in that soft silence that only exists before the day truly begins. She typed slowly, Good morning. You can. Hannah set the phone down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a few seconds, breathing deeply. Then she returned to breakfast. Eggs, carefully cut fruit, bread warming in the small oven, simple gestures, anchors. When the doorbell rang, the sky was still a pale blue. Christopher entered quietly, as if respecting that space more than any Sinclair Holdings boardroom. Good morning. Are you okay? He asked softly. Good morning. I'm fine. Thank you, Hannah replied. He looked around. The simple apartment, the small table, the smell of coffee, a world completely different from his, and strangely more real. They're still sleeping, she explained. That's fine, he said. I'll wait. Hannah poured coffee for both of them. They sat across from each other at the table. There was no urgency, just things left unsaid. I don't know how I'm going to explain all this, she confessed after a few minutes. They're 5. To them, you're just someone new. Christopher nodded. I don't want to confuse them, he said, or force anything. They don't owe me anything. She looked at him surprised. Not everyone understands that. I know, he replied. I spent my whole life being pushed into roles I didn't choose. I won't do that to them. Something in Hannah's chest loosened. Theo notices everything, she continued. Lily trusts quickly, but both of them need to feel safe. Then that's how we start, Christopher said. I'll be someone constant, present, no titles, no promises that are too big. She smiled, tired. You speak differently now, because now I have something to lose, he answered honestly. Hannah stood. I'll wake them up. It's time. Christopher remained in the kitchen, taking a deep breath, as if about to step into the most important meeting of his life. In the bedroom, Hannah sat first on Lily's bed. Sweetheart, she whispered, time to wake up. Is it morning already? Lily murmured, rubbing her eyes. It is. Did you dream about me? She asked sleepily. I did, Hannah replied, smiling. Theo woke on his own, sitting up in bed, alert. Hi, Mummy, he said directly. Hannah answered, Good morning, my prince. Did you sleep well? Theo thought for a second. Yes. Hannah got them ready for the day. In the kitchen, Lily came in first, excited. Good morning, she announced. Good morning, Christopher replied, smiling. Theo came in behind her and pointed to a specific chair. You sit there. Christopher obeyed without question. During breakfast, they talked about small things, school, snow, a drawing Lily wanted to bring. Christopher listened more than he spoke. When they left, he drove Hannah and the children to school. Theo waved. Lily blew a kiss. In the car, Hannah stayed quiet for a while. Christmas is in 3 days, she said at last. Christopher nodded. I know. It came quickly. Yes, and a lot is going to change. It will, he replied, but not today. When they arrived at the Sinclair house, Emma was standing at the door. Her gaze met Christopher's, and something there no longer worked. Margaret appeared right behind her. Emma, she said firmly, we need to talk. For the first time, Emma looked uncertain. Christopher gently placed a hand on Hannah's back. You're not alone, he said. And Hannah knew. The game was turning. Christmas was approaching, and with it, the whole truth. The Sinclair house had never felt so quiet as it did that grey afternoon, when the sky seemed like a glass lid pressed over the snow. Hannah crossed the main hall with restrained steps, feeling the weight of the past weeks settle into her body like a soaked coat. Emma, the stairs, the pressure, the DNA test, and now the promise of a Christmas arriving in less than 24 hours. At the top of the stairs, Margaret called her with a voice too firm to be just an invitation. Hannah, please. In the office, Christopher stood in the hallway still as a protective shadow. His eyes met hers. A silent question. Do you want me to come? Hannah took a deep breath and nodded almost imperceptibly, as if to say, I can handle this. But Christopher didn't move away. He stayed close enough to remind her she was no longer alone. The office smelled of paper, leather, and control. Richard was there, standing with his hands behind his back. Margaret sat upright. And Emma. Emma leaned against the wall, impeccable, as if tension were just another accessory. We're going to resolve this today, Margaret said without preamble. Emma smiled softly. Margaret, I truly don't understand why so much formality. I only want what's best for Christopher. Christopher stepped in and closed the door behind him. Then be honest, Emma. Her smile faltered for half a second, so quickly almost no one would notice. But Hannah did. Margaret opened a thick folder and slid a stack of pages across the desk. I received this last night, she said, her voice steady, from an old family partner, a man who has known our name for decades and has never contacted me for anything until now. Emma stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. Richard stepped forward, his voice low. He said he was contacted by you. By me? Emma let out a short laugh. That's ridiculous. Margaret didn't change her expression. No, ridiculous was thinking we wouldn't find out. She turned the first page, revealing screenshots, emails, messages. It wasn't a tabloid scandal. It was worse. Intent. You offered information about Christopher, Margaret continued. His schedule, his routine, his commitments, projects in Beaver Creek, and you used the word fragility when referring to him. Hannah felt her stomach tighten. Christopher, the millionaire CEO carrying an empire on his shoulders, being described as fragile by someone who claimed to love him. Emma straightened her shoulders. I was protecting our future. You were negotiating my name, Christopher replied coldly, and that is unforgivable. Emma inhaled deeply and her mask began to crack. You're judging me for trying to keep you on the right path? You got involved with an employee, with the cook, and now you want me to pretend that this doesn't... Don't talk about her like that, Christopher cut in, firm, his voice low and sharp. Never again. Margaret stood, elegance turning into steel. Hannah is nothing like that. And you, Emma, are the person I brought into my home, believing you were appropriate. I trusted you, and I was wrong. Richard opened the door. You need to leave this house and disappear from our lives. Emma stood frozen for a moment, as if the world had no right to disobey her. What? You can't do this to me, Margaret. I can, Margaret replied. And I will. Emma looked at Christopher, trying to pull him in with her eyes. Chris, and we have plans. You're the CEO of Sinclair Holdings. You have responsibilities. You can't... I can, Christopher said, with a calm that was frightening. Because I am the CEO. I decide. And I choose not to have someone like you in my life. Emma exhaled sharply, her face hardening. So that's it? You're going to throw everything away because of her? Hannah felt the urge to respond, but Christopher was faster. I'm not choosing because of her, he said, stepping forward. I'm choosing because of who I am when I'm near her, and because of my children. Emma went pale. This won't last, she hissed, her voice finally losing its polish. You'll regret this. No, Margaret replied firmly. You're the one who will regret underestimating a mother. Marlene appeared in the hallway as if summoned by fate itself, and Margaret made a simple gesture. Please escort Miss Monroe to the exit. Emma passed Hannah, her eyes burning with anger. You think you've won, she murmured under her breath. Hannah held her gaze. I never wanted a war with anyone, she replied just as quietly. Unlike you. Emma hesitated. Then she left, the sound of her heels echoing like a bitter ending. When the front door closed, the silence that remained was different. It wasn't vigilance. It was space. A new space no one yet knew how to fill. Margaret sat down slowly, as if her posture had aged in a single day. Christopher, she began, but her voice faltered. He didn't attack her, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at his parents with honest exhaustion. I need to go, he said. But before that, you're going to listen to me. Richard nodded stiffly. Christopher took a deep breath. I spent my whole life trying to be the perfect son, the perfect man, the perfect CEO. And many times I was. But I failed at what mattered most without even knowing I was failing. Hannah held her breath. Hannah raised Theo and Lily alone, he continued, looking at his mother. She didn't show up asking for money. She didn't ask for my last name. She didn't ask for anything. And you treated her like she was an opportunist. Margaret lowered her gaze. I know, she whispered. Richard said nothing, but his jaw was tight, as if swallowing pride with difficulty. Christopher then looked at Hannah, and his voice softened. I'm picking them up tomorrow morning, if you allow it. I want to spend Christmas Eve with you. I want to do this the right way. Hannah nodded, her eyes shining. You can. Christopher left first. Hannah stayed a moment longer with Margaret and Richard. The air felt lighter, but it still hurt. Margaret spoke first. Hannah, we're coming to your home tonight. Hannah frowned, surprised. Tonight? Yes, Margaret said, her voice more human than Hannah had ever heard it. 2 days before Christmas. It seems appropriate to ask for forgiveness while there's still time. Richard finally spoke, his voice low. I don't like admitting when I'm wrong. He looked down, then at her. But I was. Hannah swallowed hard. It's okay, she managed. But the children are small, they'll find it strange. Margaret nodded, and for the first time there was vulnerability there. We are the ones who need to adapt. Night fell early in Aspen. When the doorbell rang at Hannah's apartment, Lily was already in her pajamas and Theo was drawing on the rug, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Hannah opened the door and found Margaret and Richard standing outside. No gala coats, no practiced poses, just 2 adults carrying the weight of a mistake. Margaret stepped in first, looking around carefully, as if she were walking into a world she had never allowed to exist near her. Good evening, she said softly. Theo looked up, suspicious. Are you the lady from the big house? He asked, pointing with his pencil. Hannah held her breath. Margaret, however, lowered herself slowly, respectfully to his height. I am, she replied. My name is Margaret. May I know yours? Theo hesitated, then answered, Theo. It's nice to meet you, Theo, Margaret said, not forcing any touch. And you? Lily appeared behind him, curious. I'm Lily, she announced. Richard, stiff, seemed unsure what to do with his hands. Lily decided for him. She stepped closer, studied his face, and concluded with the merciless honesty of a child. You look angry. Richard blinked, unsure whether to laugh or apologize to the universe. He began, his voice faltering. I get serious when I'm nervous. You're nervous? Lily asked, surprised. Richard glanced at Hannah for a second, as if asking permission to be real. Hannah nodded, barely perceptible. I am, he admitted, because I want to do this the right way. Lily smiled, satisfied. Then sit down. Mommy has hot chocolate. Margaret pressed a hand to her chest, as if those words had struck her with unexpected tenderness. In the small kitchen, Hannah served hot chocolate and cookies. Margaret observed every detail as if she were seeing for the first time what a real home looked like. Scattered toys, a simple dish towel, photos on the refrigerator. One photo in particular made Margaret catch her breath. Theo and Lily when they were smaller, smiling, snow clinging to their hair. Margaret whispered. They're beautiful. They are, Hannah replied, with quiet pride. Margaret took a deep breath and finally looked at Hannah, truly looked at her. I need to apologize, she said, her voice trembling, for the way I spoke to you, for what I implied, for what I imagined. Richard nodded. We've always seen the world through a lens of risk, he said, swallowing hard. And we forgot that sometimes the risk is us. Hannah felt tears threaten, but she kept her voice steady. I just wanted to protect my children. Margaret nodded, eyes wet. And you did, alone, while She stopped, and shame finished the sentence. Lily interrupted without ceremony. Are you coming for Christmas? Margaret looked at the little girl as if the question were a chance to begin again. If you want us to, we would really like that. Theo frowned seriously and asked the question that made the air stop moving. Are you going to be nice to Mommy? Margaret swallowed her pride. I'm going to try to be better than I was. She knelt again, close to him. Will you help me? Theo thought for 2 seconds, as if signing a contract. I will. Richard let out a breath that seemed to have been trapped for years. Margaret looked at Hannah. Tomorrow, Christmas Eve, we want you and the children to spend it at our house. She hesitated. Not because of tradition, because of choice. I want to know them. I want to start the right way. Hannah looked at her children. Lily was already smiling, excited. Theo watched carefully, cautious, but not closed. I accept, Hannah said, her voice thick, but with one condition. Margaret nodded, ready for any demand. The condition is simple, Hannah continued. The children come first. No games, no pressure, no control. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment and nodded. Agreed. When Margaret and Richard left, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, as if the world itself had decided to forgive. Hannah closed the door, leaned her back against it, and took a deep breath. Theo approached her. Mommy, that serious man is from the work friend's side, right? Hannah smiled. He is. Lily yawned. Is the work friend going to tell the story tomorrow? Hannah laughed softly. Maybe. She turned off the lights and took the children to their room, and when she was finally alone, her phone vibrated. A message from Christopher. Thank you for letting my parents into your home. I'll come by early tomorrow. Hannah held the phone against her chest. 2 days before Christmas, everything had begun to fall apart. And now, 1 day before, everything was beginning to be rebuilt. Without Emma, without masks, without fear, only truth. And, for the first time, a future that finally felt possible. Christmas began early at the Sinclair house. Morning light poured through the tall windows, reflecting off the fresh snow in the garden and bathing everything in a soft, golden glow. There was no rush, no meetings, no buzzing phones. For the first time in many years, that enormous house woke up to something that couldn't be bought. Theo was the first to appear at the top of the stairs, still in his pajamas, holding the banister carefully. He paused there for a few seconds, studying the space, as if making sure everything was still where it belonged. Lily, he called softly. She appeared right behind him, hair messy, eyes shining. Luke! She whispered, pointing at the huge tree in the living room. The lights were still on. The presents lined up underneath, simple and extravagant at the same time, not because of their price, but because of their intention. Hannah came right after them, wearing a light sweater, her face calm despite the emotion she tried to hide. Good morning, my loves, she said, kneeling down. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Lily replied, hugging her. Theo didn't run. He walked closer and asked seriously, Are we all staying together today? Hannah took a deep breath before answering. Today, yes. Christopher watched everything from the doorway, a cup of coffee still in his hands. The billionaire CEO, used to leading empires and boardrooms, felt something completely new. He didn't need to command anything. Just be there. Margaret came down the stairs a few minutes later. She stopped when she saw the scene. Hannah with the children, Christopher nearby, the lightness in the air, and something inside her finally softened. She approached slowly. Merry Christmas, she said, her voice quieter than usual. Lily was the first to respond, spontaneous as ever. Merry Christmas, are you having breakfast with us? Margaret blinked, surprised, and smiled. I will if you'll let me. Breakfast was simple and imperfect. Hot chocolate spilled on the table. Theo complained that the bread was too hot. Lily wanted to open the presents too early. Richard watched in silence, too emotional to hide it, when Christopher placed a hand on his shoulder in a quiet gesture of truce. When they finally settled into the living room, Hannah stayed a little behind, observing. Margaret noticed and walked over. "Thank you for bringing them," she said sincerely. "I know this wasn't easy." "It wasn't," Hannah replied, "but it was important." Margaret nodded. "For us too." The presents began to be opened. Lily tore the wrapping paper with excitement. Theo opened his carefully, as if every fold mattered. When he found a detailed wooden train, he lifted his eyes slowly. "This," he began. "Was this from you?" Christopher knelt beside him. "It was. I saw it and thought of you." Theo examined the toy for a few seconds, then said simply, "We can build it together later." It wasn't a grand invitation. It was something better. Acceptance. Mid-morning, the snow began to fall harder again. Hannah helped the children bundle up, and everyone went out into the garden. Lily tried to build a crooked snowman. Theo patiently explained why the base needed to be bigger. Christopher watched, laughing softly as Margaret stepped closer to Hannah. "I spent my whole life trying to control everything," she confessed. "Today, I realize control doesn't create family." Hannah looked at her. "Presence does." Margaret nodded, moved. Lunch was served early without formality. No assigned seats. Christopher sat beside Hannah naturally, as if that had always been his place. As the afternoon wore on, tiredness arrived gently. Lily fell asleep on the couch, hugging her new teddy bear. Theo sat on the floor, building the train with Christopher in comfortable silence. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Theo asked, without looking up. Christopher answered without hesitation. "I am." Theo gave a small nod, satisfied. When the sky began to darken, Hannah helped the children get ready to leave. At the door, Lily hugged Margaret without ceremony. Theo waved at Richard. "Bye, serious man." Richard laughed, emotional. "Merry Christmas, champ." In the car on the way home, Lily slept. Theo looked out the window. "Mommy," he said softly. "The work friend likes us, right?" Hannah smiled. "He does." Theo thought a little longer. "Okay then." That night, after putting the children to bed, Hannah received a message from Christopher. "Today was the best Christmas of my life. Thank you for trusting me." She replied with just one line. It was the beginning, because it was. Some stories don't need to end with grand promises. They end with presence, with truth, with a place that finally feels right. And that Christmas morning, everything found its own. If this story touched your heart, like this video, tell us in the comments. Do you believe some families are built with time, not just blood? Share it with someone who loves emotional stories and click on the next story on your screen. Because here, on Hearts Rewritten, every love deserves a new page.